Hey everyone, Joel here with DissectingDIY. We have another how-to video. Hopefully I'm starting to get better at making these. I do have to say that my camera equipment is still shoddy. Sometimes they just quit on me. It's really annoying and I don't get the shots that I need. But this was a really fun project to do. I got this idea basically by listening to a song. There's this part where there's this like little ping and I kind of just saw a flag that thin blue line powering up, and then I just went out and sought to make it. I have got this video playing in the background pretty close to what I wanted. It's not exact, but anyways, we're going to show you how to put this thing together. We're going to show you all the, we're going to try to show you all the ins and outs. There'll probably be some things missing. For anything that is missing, you can message me and I will do my best to answer them. Guys, I really love making these videos. They are so awesome to make, but this one was, I had to invest in tools, epoxy, and we all know if anyone's deals with epoxy, they know that that stuff isn't cheap. Never mind the frustration of dry times. But all of it together, I gotta say, it went together nicely. Let's get into trying to show you how this exactly works, how it is put together, because there was some figuring out to do. It's not impossible. It's not that the average person can't do it, but I don't want them to having to deal with the frustrations I have. Why not just cut that out? Guys, if you're able to make these for people and sell them, that is awesome. That is actually the goal of this. I love giving away information freely. However, it is troublesome when trying to rebuild my wares, so to speak, to basically do another project or to make more things that people will enjoy. So that being said, I can't really upgrade my camera equipment. I can't really do all the stuff that I want to. So if you could do anything, the biggest thing that you can do right now is subscriptions, likes, and shares. Those are paramount. And then I also have some new ways where it doesn't really come out of your pocket. I am an Amazon affiliate. So because I'm an Amazon affiliate now, I can, I can just have you click on these links, and the stuff that you want to buy, I get a little bit of a cut of. It's usually like 1%. It's not much. It's pennies on the dollar. But hey, it's better than nothing. And then I'm also a Patreon now, because I give most of the information I have for free. I don't really believe in paywalls. So because I don't believe in paywalls, guys, if you could subscribe, say that you've sold a couple flags, you could subscribe to the channel. If you could maybe do a couple months of Patreon, one of the higher tiers. Again, that tier system I'm kind of using as just a way to support the page. I'm still trying to figure it out. And, I basically am on YouTube. Guys, if you have any questions about this, let me know. I will do my best to fill you in. And then I'm going to have a bunch of stuff in the comments for those who really want to kind of read the fine print. And we'll get you started. So again, this is the RGB Epoxy Thin Line flag. Brought to you. This is the how-to. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Hopefully I'm getting better at making these videos. If not, leave a comment down in the description. Give me pointers. Tell me what I can do better. But anyways, wicked excited about this, guys. When these get done, please show me your videos. I am on Facebook and Instagram if you want to tag me. So just show me what you got. Show me what you were able to do. I'm wicked excited to see them. All right, we're going to start this project by cutting our strips to about 37 inches each. However, by the end of this project, I realized I might want to make them a little longer, probably 37.25 to 37.5 for the lighting that will be behind it. You'll see as we go on. You just want to make sure everything here is the same size for consistency. In the first video that you just saw, you probably noticed me cutting strips that were already cut down. This is me just cutting down those strips. The strips that you saw were because I had to just do some additional and didn't get that camera footage yet, but this is me just ripping them down to 1.5 inches on the table saw. I was having some issues with the table saw cutting a little bit more off the beginning of the end, which kind of tapered them into a more oval shape, which did interfere with how they were going to glue together. And it's very important to get this step right the first time. You can't have any leeway here. Also, after sanding these, you're going to see I do every side. However, you do want to be careful, because if you're trying to rip out and sand out any saw marks, it will affect how they glue up together. And the way this project is done is there will be nothing in the back holding it all together. It'll all rely on wood glue. And here I'm just going to burn every single one. Now I am doing a black and white thin line flag, and this is just making sure that if I have to swap out any pieces, it'll be easier to just select from what I already have. And this is very helpful. Also, I think it just adds some consistency considering I'm not using a burned um, method for my black stripes. Here is just another angle of me burning each piece, and you see you really want to extend past each piece because if you stop while you're on the piece to go backwards, you're going to actually create some really dark black marks. It's going to look terrible, and you just want to continue on past the project to make sure that that does not happen. Here I'm just double checking and making sure that all the pieces that I want fit correctly. You can see I've done a very light burn on these, and this is just to get them to basically show through a little bit through the white stain. You can make them a little darker if you'd like, but it's all about preference on this one, and this is the burn style that I really liked. As you can see here, I'm attaching the union, and you notice that I took out a middle piece because that piece is going to be filled with epoxy, and this is going to make more sense. Here I'm adding razor blades to every piece. Now I know on the black pieces people will be probably wondering why I am adding razor blades. And the reason I'm doing this is because on other projects where I noticed it wasn't, there's no contrast between the union and the stripes. And that was an eyesore for me, so I decided to just do every single one. And here I'm staining everything. I will rip the razor blades out, but this is just the stain part. I did end up choosing a different stain. I was using a water-based black stain, but it just looked brown. So I ended up going with a different stain, a charcoal stain. I'll have that link down in the comments. And it just really helped it with darkening everything up and giving it that burned charcoal look. The white stain you really want to go slow on. You're going to add a layer, let it dry a little bit, and then wipe off the excess. Don't let anything stay on initially. And then you're going to sand in between with a 120 grit, and then you're going to do it all over again. I did this about 4 or 5 times to get the color I want, and then the last one I did a very, very thin layer and let the stain sit. And then of course this is the brown one, the brown look I was getting that I had to change all this out and sand it down, and the new charcoal look stain ended up working beautifully. It was really amazing. I got the look that I wanted with one or two coats and was able to make the project go quickly or a lot quicker. With the razor blades, you're going to see that I'm applying towards the razor blade. You don't want to do this. You want to actually apply towards the left side and away from that razor blade. You don't want a lot of stain by the time you get to the razor blade. And the reason is I noticed that some of the stain would actually, there would be too much of it and it would seep under the razor blade and start to intermix with the black and the white, which was a problem, and I had to fix it. Here you're probably wondering why I'm putting a polyurethane on. Now I'm doing this to protect the project for the glue up phase. So the one thing that you need to know is that you need to put this in a separate container because the black will leach into the poly as you're dipping in for more coats, and so will the white. So you want to have separate brushes and separate containers for each of the white and the black, and you want to be really careful, and you want to continue to use the razor blades on the white and black ones until the first and second layers down. After that, you'll be able to add the third and fourth final layers without worry of intermixing. So just be careful with that. Now for the sake of making this video a little bit quicker, I'm just going to show you how I'm doing the top piece. Okay, and this is the glue up, and you're going to see that I really put a lot of glue. This is a delayed setup tight bond glue. It gives you about 15 minutes of working time, and I did that because I wanted to make sure that I could get everything glued up without it setting up too quickly. So now you see I got some spillover of that glue, and I'm going to have to address it. You really want to put a lot of glue because I had one piece that I didn't. It fell apart. I had to fix it. It delayed my project. So be very generous with the wood glue and do both sides that you'll be gluing together. And then you want to clamp them. You don't want to clamp them tight together at first because you're going to want to make sure that that project is nice and flat. It has to be as flat as you can. And then finally, you see me wiping all this off. You need to get every last bit of wood glue because that white will, if it's not taken off, it'll actually need to be sanded off, and you can sand through the poly. So this is a crucial step to make sure that you're getting everything off. Be very, very attention to detail driven on making sure that there's no wood glue left. I'm using some frog tape in the stencil to just mark out. You're going to use a Dremel tool in the next video. In the next video, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a little pen tool attachment, and it really allows for greater control over the Dremel. But just take your time here, and you know, just make sure everything's consistent and that that stencil doesn't move. Now, I did look at a couple YouTube pages to find the best way to do this, and I will link the YouTube video that I pulled from. They just recommended that you just go in a single direction, and it kind of makes things go a little bit smoother and quicker. And I will also have which attachment to use down in the description. Here I'm getting ready to do an epoxy pour, and you probably saw the thermometer. You want to make sure that you heat your epoxy, especially if you're in colder climates, to at least 70 to 80 degrees. Another thing is the directions might say that you can get away with 1:30 to 3 minutes on mixing. Do not listen to this. Always, always do a 5-minute mix and make sure that it's very consistent. You're going to notice that it's going to pearl up when you mix the epoxy resin into the hardener. Always pour into the hardener, and you're just going to want to go slow with the drill, put it on a low spin setting, and really go easy with it because you're going to want to minimize how many air bubbles you're putting into the project. One other thing people try to do is they think that they can add a little bit more hardener to speed up a cure or a little bit more resin to slow it down, and this isn't the case. The stuff that you buy is formulated for a precise mix of a 2-to-1. In this case, this is a deep pour epoxy, or a 1-to-1, and it has to be really spot on, otherwise you're going to ruin the epoxy project. It won't cure properly, it'll stay rubbery, and you really want it to harden up to be like glass. Okay, so just pay attention to what you're doing on the epoxy mix. And also be sure to use the epoxy tool that calculates how much epoxy you'll need. This way you can keep the project on budget or get a realistic idea of budget. For this part of the epoxy pour, I only calculated enough for the middle of the flag, which was a mistake, as all of the epoxy ended up working its way behind the project. In hindsight, I would have made more epoxy and poured it first onto the TYVEK tape and then inserted the project that I was working on and pressed it down until the middle pushed up and then put my spacers in. Because I use a deep pour epoxy, I have an hour of working time, and I feel that this would have worked a bit better. The slow delay of the middle moving its way into the back of the flag took about an hour or two, so it depends on how you want to approach it. It should be noted that everything that moved behind the flag held everything together to my benefit. After your project has been cured enough, what you're going to do is pop this off, and you're going to notice the little tabs I take out at the end. This is so it looks like a solid piece. for the next white epoxy pour. It is important to note that you're going to need to fold over some TYVEK tape so it's smooth on either side, not sticky, and then tape it to the bottom of the project on either side so there's no leakage when you do your white pour. But once that's all done, the white pour will allow it to look like a solid piece of 1.5-inch cut wood, and it'll almost look seamless. Now when I say tape to the bottom on either side, I don't just mean the bottom. It's going to have to loop around to the sides of the flag to keep all that epoxy in and prevent it from leaking out in behind the project. So about 1/8 of an inch is going to overlap on the bottom, and then it's going to come out on top. It should overhang about 1/4 inch, and what that will do is it'll allow for you to tape it to the side so it doesn't fall out into the project. And this is me just doing the white pour. You're going to notice after everything's done that it's going to look exactly like a 1.5-inch cut piece of wood, only it will be epoxy. And it'll look almost seamless. The color looks a little different than the rest of the stripes, which is what I was going for. I kind of want people to look at it and go, hey, what's that? What is that about? And then, you know, you'll see when you're able to turn the lights on that it'll look really nice. And this is going to be great whether you're police, fire, military, dispatcher, EMS, doctor, nursing. It'll cover a lot of those and a little bit more beyond. Here I'm getting ready for a glass coat. Now I did a very light sand of the wood finish, and then for the epoxy I did a 80 grit to make sure that the epoxy had something to hold to very well. Now I'm doing my glass coat, and because I had to rebuild this mold, I did not anticipate that the epoxy would be getting behind the project again, and it did. I would recommend 64, let me see, I would probably recommend 64 to 80 ounces for this pour. And you really just want to go slow. You want to make sure that you get the proper thickness, and then there'll be a final glass coat where everything just kind of pours over the edge. Now my camera system did quit for when I was routing this out, but you really just want to go about 1/4 inch down. This is a 3/4 inch piece of poplar finished plywood, and I'm just kind of cleaning it up, making sure that the lights are going to have something even to sit on. And then I'm going to route out the wiring in the back, and then I'm going to put a 1/4 inch piece over that. So it's really going to look nice once it's done all the way around. I always have great attention to detail on everything that you do. And unfortunately, the lighting that said it was 36 inches does overlap. It goes well beyond that. It's like 36. It's actually about 37.5 inches. So I had to actually rewire this, and I'll show you how to do that. Now in a moment you're going to see I'm going to be testing out 2 different lighting strips. One is battery, and then that's the one that I'm cutting now is the battery. The battery wasn't bright enough, and then it also had a line of sight RF receiver, and you want something plugged in, because they're brighter and they tend to have that receiver that does not require line of sight, and that was key in this. And I will link the LEDs that I use in the description. There's a couple others out there that you might want to use that you can actually custom cut a little bit better, and I also will link some of those. Here I use a 1/2 inch keyhole bit with a jig I put together really quick to make my keyholes. Now here I'm just rewiring. I'm pulling off the connector and then doing a hardwired connector, so I'm better able to get a 90-degree turn on this wire when I'm building my project. And the other one was just too robust and too large, and you just want to line up all the wires. The color coding that they have, it doesn't seem accurate, and I just kind of lined everything up towards the previous, like the previous one was wired, and it worked fine. And you see I got some shrink tubing there, that's to protect it and help hold it together over time because it will be at a 90-degree. So I put it together and tested it out, and it worked fine. At this point in the project, I'm not sure if I'm going to add a 1/4 inch piece to the back. If I can fit all the electronics in without any issue, I probably won't. But if I am going to add a 1/4 inch piece, I'm just adding this paint layer as a precaution. I like to make sure everything's consistent, painted, and protected, so it'll last as long as possible. I'll also probably add a poly layer of with a matte finish, just to make sure that it is protected. Getting to this point was bittersweet. This took over a month and a half, almost 2 months, because I was using a deep pour epoxy, which had a setup time of 72 hours. It literally has 24 to 48 hours in the gel phase, so it was very difficult. The white center line I had to route out, and that was extremely frustrating because I used the wrong dye ratio. So I was literally learning as I went. Now, the back, the mold was too tight, so the project couldn't sit flat on the mold itself, which meant that the front glass layer poured into the back. I lost all that epoxy, and then I had to sand it down and do another layer. The top layer is thick because my project wasn't as flat as I would like it to be. I had to add at least a 1/4 inch to get that smooth glass surface that I was going for, and that was problematic as well. So again, you just want to make sure that your project is as flat as possible. You want to make sure that it's against your mold right. You want to make sure that you're not wasting any epoxy, because it can add literally so much time, especially when using a deep pour. In hindsight, I'm probably going to use a 1/4 inch epoxy that I can add a layer every 40 minutes or so, or whenever it enters the gel phase. So what I'm doing right now is just adding 1 or 2 coats of a polyurethane matte finish. And what that's going to do is just help protect the project. That's one of the things that I really like to do, is make sure that you have all your finishes in place where it really can stand up to the test of time, and possibly even be passed down from generation to generation. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. I'm just trying to get the thing built, so we'll see where it goes. So now we're moving into the light stage of just getting the lights mounted. Now I use a mix of using the sticky tape. Another thing, that polyurethane layer that I put on is going to help that stick, in my opinion. And then I also add these little mounting clips that came with the light, the LED light setup. So I utilize all of them. I want to make sure that I'm not going to have to take this apart and replace the LED light sooner than later, and this helps with that. And then of course, if you do need to, you can always unscrew them and peel up the old LED lights and put down some new ones. The route that I did on this is a little bit wide, but it's not a big deal, and it's about a 1/4 inch depth, which helps with diffusion, just not having that light right against the epoxy finish. Here I'm laying down a towel to protect the epoxy finish, and you really want to do this in case there's any particles or dust. You really want to clean the surface of everything before starting this project, or starting the mounting to the back plate. Once the back plate is on, you're going to do a couple drill holes. You probably might want to use clamps. I was a little lazy here and didn't use them, and just to make sure that the first couple of screw holes don't shift. Once it's in place, once you got that one screw down, and you drill the rest of the holes. I use a fine thread drywall screw, and what this is going to do is to just prevent anything from causing the crack. And then of course you see I'm putting everything in with a screwdriver. That being said, that third screw hole, this project is about 20-25 pounds. It's pretty heavy, and I added that third screw hole because I really wanted to make sure that I could maximize the stud location, and B, make sure that the screws are going to be able to hold up this project, especially since it's pushed out away from the wall a little bit more weight that it's going to have to contend with. I did about 16 screws in the back on either side of the white stripe, making sure not to screw into the LEDs of the white stripe. And then of course once that's done, it should be ready to hang, and then you're all done. And that is the epoxy flag build, and hopefully you enjoyed this. And that sums up this build. Just some pointers on how to actually build this to alleviate weight. Just try to make sure that the surface that you're, when gluing up, is as flat as possible. You really want to make it as flat as possible, because if you don't, the thicker this glass coat is going to have to be. On top of that, the backer board, I used a 3/4 inch. That added a lot of weight to the flag itself, and you might want to go with a 1/2 inch. Just know that when you're doing that centerpiece here, that you want that backer board to hold it all together, and that's why I went so thick. But if those pointers help alleviate the weight of your project and just make it a little bit easier to make and handle, especially when mounting, I hope that information helps you. Any questions, just put them down in the comments and I'll do what I can. If you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe. And of course, we are now Amazon affiliate, and we have a Patreon page. If you can do anything to help support the channel, as this project was a labor of love and expense. So any help that you can offer to help support the channel is greatly appreciated. Thank you.